Welcome back to the Live by Heart Today show number 91. This is a show designed to help you navigate change, uncertainty, and the world we found ourselves in. We'll talk a little bit about science. We'll talk a little bit about how our body works, a little bit about intuition, and we talk a lot about transformation.
Live by Heart Today is brought to you by
wearehistorically.com. Conscious Human Apparel.
Learn to play jazz piano like a pro, by a pro, with Jazz Piano Pro Essentials at jazzpianopro.com.
Hello, I'm Dawn Spiegelberg. This show is in our pilgrimage series. Today's theme is flowing. With me for today's Heart to Heart is my special guest, Peter Lucas, fitness and wellness specialist and community leader. Welcome, Peter.
Hey, Dawn. Thanks for having me back on the show. How's it going?
It's going great. I'm so glad to have you here. And I'm really excited about this conversation we're going to have because you have been mastering the art of flow for quite a while now. Give me an example of some recent flows you've been experiencing.
Well, I would say nothing is more really pertinent than the most recent memories of connection. I think the different communities and gatherings that have been happening in my own personal life and just in the communities and networks that I'm a part of, it's just almost like everyone was activated at once. And the divine timing and the flow has just been ever more apparent from the different people you meet, the synchronicities, the times you meet, the parallels and paths you're both on. There's just been such a beautiful example of divine timing that just goes to show that the flow is always going. It's like that river. And as long as we have put ourselves in position to kind of just navigate and steer and, go with the current, we can really lead into it and take us to these magical places of experience, of unity. And in terms of the peak flow, I would say the most recent gathering I was a part of, from just the delays that people experience in traffic to the random happenings in their own experience and how everyone can come together and share those puzzle pieces of perspective. It's just been a beautiful reminder that this life is out of our control. But when we really surrender to that knowing, it almost feels like we're more in control than we've ever been. Because everything you're seeking in your heart just begins to manifest. And as I like to see, it's one of the new kind of iterations of flow concepts we could say I'm working on. It's that sailing by the heart. It's allowing yourself to just realize that the flow and the stream of universal consciousness of life, of creation, is always going. And it's up to us to really utilize that. It's just like it's almost considered like a leaf in a river, right? So many people try to act like they can swim upstream. And you're just going to be stuck. It's going to be tumultuous. It's going to be this arduous journey, and you're not going to go very far. There's others that really love just getting caught up in the wake and the turbulence. They love going through the rocks and the stones and getting caught up in the whirlpools. Others like to just go chill on the shore. Arguably the most dangerous position, because when you're not a part of the flow, you're taking yourself out of experience. But sailing by the heart is really just recognizing that the flow and stream of the universe is always trying to express itself through you in order to allow that to be effortless, to really be peak flow, those beautiful experiences of play. It's up to us to realize that we lead with our heart, with our intentions of what we really want to experience. And then life will put us in the position and opportunities to really navigate it. So in terms of recent examples of peak flow, it's really just been mastering that and living out the validation of it through just putting your foot out there in the door, or putting your step out there in the world and seeing the different opportunities that come from it. So long-winded answer, but I hope that answered the question.
No, that's really beautiful. And you're describing what people feel when they spend time directly in nature.
Yeah.
We're always in nature because we're in the world. But when people go to the woods, there's more constant flow. Less barrier to the flow when you're walking through the woods, when you're listening to the birds. And that was a beautiful description of the flow. I'd like you to take a brief moment and talk about the men's group that you've started, and you said divine timing. I'm I know you've wanted to do a men's group for quite a while. So talk about how it was that it is happening now.
When you bring it up and like, how did it really start? Like the divine timing of it. It was just whenever I had the knowing in my beingness that I wanted more community, and the time is now.
Wow.
Especially for a group of men, there's something that we all haven't had in a long, long time, because most of us don't go out and forage in the woods and go hunting on 2-week, 4-week expeditions together,
Right.
bringing back the kill and the hunt for the tribe. We don't have that opportunity to really be vulnerable and share and express ourselves spiritually, because there's really not that many communities that are open for all types of men. You'll see some that are like super macho, everyone's tatted up. I mean, I know I have beard and long hair, but everyone has beards and long hairs, and
Yeah,
and it's all super macho activities. But it's like, no, like there's other people that aren't represented in that. And for me, it's important to bring it back to the essence of what we are as people. And we thrive on community. And especially men, it's this mentorship aspect. It's the real distinction. If I could actually probably put it out there, it aligns in the fact that we lost our rite of passage. Women, you have yours ingrained in you. You have your periods. Like regardless of what happens, you reach a certain age where it's like you are literally brought into the world as a woman.
Yes.
And you have your own essentially rituals that go into this. You have your own practices. We don't
I'd like
have
to
that.
add, I need to add also, it's not just starting menses. That's one of them, but we have another one, giving birth.
Exactly.
And then we have another one, stopping menses.
Yes. Yeah.
So we have multiple.
The triangle.
Yeah. And you guys, I don't know.
Exactly. So it's just like, we used to have like, all right, son, you're becoming a man. Here's, our sacred herbs and plant medicine. Go adventure by yourself for 2 weeks and come back.
Vision quest.
Exactly.
And now you've got your license at 18 and you can go drink when you're 21. What kind of rite of passages are those?
Yeah. So what you see is that a lot of men kind of get trapped naturally in the immature forms of masculinity. And because we live in a culture where it's cancel culture, really, we akin things that are negative as like toxic.
Yeah.
Versus for me, I don't see anything in terms of true masculinity as toxic. And that right there dissociates and disconnects so many men from their own beingness.
Yes.
So it was really just the inspiration of reminding everyone that like, yo, like you have to be tapped in with your emotions to really be a man. Like, as I see it, like if you're not, you're just a little boy. It's the immature expressions of masculinity, because you're just throwing temper tantrums and you're angry. But that's the most dangerous aspect of what we represent of the duality, is the destruction. We're the destroyer and you're the creator, obviously, with your ability to kind of pull in consciousness from the ether and hold a vessel like within you. That's wild to me, but it's one of those things where we're so disconnected from what actually makes us harmonized as men that we can't help but have a space for it to really tap back into the old things, because what is the fundamental aspect of the group is that it's all ages. So you have men from your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s all together, sharing their puzzle, sharing their puzzle pieces of perspectives with the group. And it's this opportunity for men to kind of wake up from the selfishness that is naturally ingrained in boyhood, where it's just about me, that it takes you to that greater aspect of there's others that are experiencing what I'm doing. And Rusty actually said it perfectly at the event. We've had a lot of friends in this world, but I have physical brothers, but I don't really have many brothers, like real almost peers, real tapped in individuals that I can count on, that I can rely on, that actually get my perspective, that understand me, that can see me. And in this day and age when there's so much division and isolation, it was just the only thing that made sense. And I think that's the thing about these types of gatherings and sacred circles, is it's really us regaining our power back. Our ability to manifest, our ability to hold space, to be compassionate, to really bring out the Christ consciousness within each of us by holding space with shared intention. And that's like, it's the future.
That's beautiful. And you're expressing the Christ consciousness as a man, not as a woman. And there's so much, men, women, the difficulty with whose role is whose. And basically, yeah, we give birth, but now men are raising kids, which is so different than
Right.
the way it was originally practiced.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed too is the way women get together is they face each other, right? Think of the sewing bees, and they have coffee and their elbows on the table, really close.
Yeah.
And the way men get together is side by side. So when men have coffee, right, the chairs aren't facing each other, they're sort of facing out.
Yeah.
When men hunt, they hunt out, not facing each other.
Yeah.
Right. All these things that men do is side by side with a common goal.
Yeah.
Which is very different than the way women get together.
Mm.
So I love that you're getting men together and developing manly flow.
Oh yeah.
I've been to some seminars where men have gotten up and spoken and sought the advice of the individual who's very successful, very developed, very teleos is the Greek word. And they've said, different things about the struggles they're having in their life. And more often than not, the struggles they have, they're different subjects, different things, but the speaker often would say the same thing. And that is, you don't have a man in your life to show you how to be a man. You haven't grown up enough.
Yeah.
And these are adult men, but shocked to hear that they haven't progressed.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's that natural aspect of one avenue of kind of the introspection behind it would be, again, because we lack a ritual. We lack that rite of passage. We lack that. Unless you're a culture that's specifically like your bar mitzvah, like there's very few cultures that have that, like, you're a man now. What does that mean to be a man?
Yeah.
And that's the issue when we're living in a world where it's society raising children, where it's culture and whatever is the hot topic, the mainstream is raising the youth, because they again become so disconnected from their own beingness. And I think we're seeing that on a massive scale now, people that are just not really sure what their true position is in this play of life. So they get caught up in the experiences, they get caught up in the pains in the past. And purely because of that, there's actually a really beautiful thing that I've been able to see in the avenue of healing potential with these different groups, from just a feminine group to a masculine group to the both co-ed groups, is it gives people a chance to really reset and to and to kind of break that cycle of realizing that it's like, oh, it's not just everyone, that there are different people. And once you kind of have that crack in the foundation of that, it just quickly crumbles, because you start to see more and more people gravitate towards you that are going to serve as those reminders that it's like, oh, it's not like that. This is kind of more so how people can be. And I've found definitely my influence of that whole aspect of, you don't really learn how to be a man, is like I really just was discernment. It was learning how to be a man through how not to be a man, from all the different examples that I had in my life of just in terms of how to treat women. And it's always been a fascinating experience just to look at what you mentioned earlier, the fact that, like, we really haven't been in this experiment for long in terms of men and women intermingling. And there's so many different subtleties of that in terms of just the energy and the sharing, in terms of the facing. Like, that was a beautiful point, because it's like, oh yeah, it totally makes sense. And that's the stuff that's beautiful, because it rings true to our heart and how we know we're supposed to structure ourselves. Like, women were always the ones really holding things down. You guys were the glue. We always had to go out. I don't want to say expendable, but it was one of those things where it's like, we had to go out and
sacrifice.
It was that type of mature masculine energy where it's just like, we're the protectors. Like, we know we're literally physically designed to protect, and to fight, so it's being able to control all the energies that come with that. And moving forward, I just think we're at a time now where we truly can't master each of our own divine energies until we come to this realization that until you harmonize both dualities within yourself, you can never fully unlock the beingness or the effortlessness of that Christ consciousness. That's the expression of it, is the spirit embodied is what we are, this human experience, but it's the harmony of both that really brings out the beauty that is God's creation. and bring it all back to the flow, it requires us to do that type of inner work and inner looking to realize, where are we out of imbalance? Where, for a woman, for examples, I always get asked this question because of the way we're structured and how we operate. And I remember it was the first sacred gathering, and it was one of the women asked me, like, so what can I do as a woman to be more harmonized with my masculine energies?
That's a great question.
Yeah. And I was just like, all right, I'm starting off hot, because I honestly didn't think she was talking to me. And then it was silent and everyone was looking at me, and I looked up and everyone was still looking at me. I was like, oh, is that to me? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, okay, well, interesting. Having a bunch of women looking at you being like, all right, well, how do we tap in to that energy? Being like, oh, this is the first time that like I've actually had a really loving, open invitation to explain something, because usually it's called mansplaining, so it's just seeing that aspect of that different respect of, and to answer the question that I answered for her was, we're all wired differently. One of the things I like about this show is you always bring the science into it. So men, we're wired, again, for a lot of the physical feedback for this world, a lot of the more like the tactile responses, navigation. So we're wired more frontal and rear lobe. And women, you're left and right hemisphere. And that's one of the reasons why our meditation forms have to be different. Because for us to really be in harmony physically, energetically, spiritually, we have to build the left-right hemisphere. We have to dial it down. We see this very example with toddlers and the men and women expressions of how things are. Toddler guys are like, let's go, That's what we have to dial back. We have to master stillness and calm, because that's the feminine. If we want to go old school, we can think of, the more like the spear and then the chalice. For us, we have to realize that we're always set to go do to get out there, to literally act out. Our meditation is just a more natural form for us. But for women, it's the opposite. You're all very more reserved. It's the communal aspect, the conversations, it's the stillness, it's the openness, the vulnerability, the chalice, it's you can open that heart and a big old hug, and you can just feel that maternal energy. But one of the things that was also a plight of those old times is the inability for women to get out there and be assertive and do their own things when the men were back, because there was the cultural thing. So women nowadays, it's like, it's really important to master your creative expressions. And the simplest answer is to just do, like to simply get in the mode of action, because so many silence themselves. They make themselves, secondary to the masculine energies that are in the room. They'll see the problem, but they won't speak on it. It's getting out there and being more assertive and direct with it. And in terms of the creative expression, that's the easiest way to do it. Because when you're allowing yourself to open up and play, that's the form of meditation that gets you into that state of being. You're not really doing your painting, you're just being with the painting. You're playing music and giving yourself up to the music. And it's that form of creative expression where it aligns you, again, more with the front and back, because you're having to use the external, the sensory, you're having to pick up all the different feedback. Get out in nature is always a good one. But most importantly, it's just do. If you want to think, we just have to flip it. So for men, like for us, we just have to invert it. We have to dial it down. We have to be more calm. We have to be more collected, be more meticulous, analytical. Because again, women are the exact opposite in that sense. You guys are naturally more analytical. Watch how toddlers play again. Like you see, like the most fascinating thing I've ever seen was a group of girls completely self-organize in like a kitchen restaurant setup. And it's just like they had cooks, they had servers, they had people taking the money. And it's just like, wait, these are like a bunch of 5-year-olds and they're doing it on their own. Like how many of them have actually worked in the kitchen? None of them, but they're like, they just, again, like they had their own little leadership group. They all were communicating and talking. And then you see the boys and it's like, what are they doing? They're beating each other with the pans. It's the natural aspect of, you have to look at the path of least resistance in the more egoic expression. Like, where does the body want to not act? Where does it feel the tension? So it's like leaning into it, where it's like we overcome those internal resistances, you level up. So it's the same thing for man and woman. For us, again, we have to sit and be calm and continue to sit and be calm and master that, master just being. And then you can really do. So in a long-winded answer, it's to really apply the exact opposite of what you would usually do in a lot of situations, awaken your fire again, I guess you could say, the fierce love. And all the women, I guess you'd say, the divine feminine can tap into that divine masculine through the more creative energies that you guys have naturally for the more maternal instincts and the nurturer, the lover, and what's more fierce than the lioness protecting your cubs? So it's utilizing your own experience to express the masculine in the feminine way, because that's a big misconception that I've seen with our current society, is that women have to act like men and men have to act like women. It's like, no, there's different expressions of it, because for me, the way I've looked at it is the energies are so different. They can never be applied the same. Like from a space with single to both to just one or the other, I'll put it this way. The feminine energy is experienced as very warm. It's very light. It almost feels like there's just a bunch of threads of connection. It's very inclusive. It's almost like that warm, ooey gooey, like a chocolate brownie. It gives you that kind of like, oh, I love it. And with the masculine energy, it was very different. It wasn't as warm in the sense of like the openness in the heart. There was still a different type of that, but it was a lot more fierce. It wasn't as flowy. It was more like campfire, so it was very much, again, like the women were like the pool of water, and the men's was like that raging inferno. And like there's a beautiful dance between each that you have to really come to understand, but we only can fully see it in others when we recognize it within ourselves, when the fire comes up, when you need to kind of calm it down and dampen it. So yeah, there's a lot you can go into about it, but it's been pretty cool.
There really is. And those are beautiful images for us to think about the differences between men and women. And we'll come back after a short break and talk about the fire of men and the water of women. Thanks, Peter.
Let's give a shout out to our sponsors. Thank you, We Are Historically, for making this show possible. Shop online at wearehistorically.com.
I'm Dawn Spiegelberg, a posture specialist and coherence coach. We hold responsibilities on our shoulders, and when our responsibilities become too great, we begin to bend over with the load. And that load actually begins to curve our back, and in this portion of our back is our sense of commitment. So maintain alignment with who you are and the responsibilities that you actually should embrace. Contact me today to align your body, align your mind, and align your beliefs.
Hi, I'm Darius Wilrich. I instruct an online video course that teaches anyone how to play jazz piano like a pro with my proven step-by-step system that makes it simple to learn. Jazz Piano Pro Essentials. Learn the quickest way to start memorizing and playing scales today. Download my free Quick Start Guide.
Welcome back to the Live by Heart Today show with my special guest, Peter Lucas. And we're talking about the fire of men and the water of women and doing. So I'm finding that doing really, really is powerful, because as you're doing, and if it's a repetitive doing, then it frees your mind. 100%. When you move your body, the part of your brain that's comparing, contrasting, measuring is busy managing all of those nervous impulses from the action of doing, which frees the other part of your mind to be.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about the fire of men and the water of women, because I think there's a misunderstanding with regard to let's just use fire for example. If a man is raging, if the fire is hot and it's high, I see women trying to douse it with water, and I don't think that's the right thing, right? What's the whole deal with the patriarchy is evil? I think saying that is the wrong response. Maybe take away a few of the logs that are burning, but don't douse it with fire, with water. Just let it come down to an ember, but don't put it out, because
Yeah.
Squashing fire completely changes the entire workings of all of nature.
Yeah. And then
And
it's just,
so for women too, women, if their flow is too flowy, if their little babbling brook becomes this raging tsunami, stopping that, with a wall of fire, or adding fire to squelch it and to try to destroy it, is not the answer.
Mm-mm.
So those are beautiful images, and we can help each other as men and as women to do that which is beneficial rather than destructive.
Oh yeah. And it's funny that you say that too, because if you look at like the extremes of both, I think it's always really important just to kind of, I guess you would say, define some of these different traits of, when the water could become a danger where it then drowns you, it's no longer enjoyable, or the fire begins to burn you. And we can kind of look at it as the sense of it's actually probably some of the most intense ones would be the toxic feminine energies would be the how can I put this in words? It would probably be like the jealous and withholding, like that inaction, retreating. And men would be like over aggressive, insecure, irritable. So you can start to see how there's so many different parallels with the two, where you could see the more masculine energy of courage could be turned into the immature form of cowardice. Or you have the sense of kind of hope and aspiration with like that divine goddess of being like, oh yes, we can do it, to despair and self-loathing. And that's the reason why it's very important for, I think, each person right now to kind of look within their own life and their own experience to kind of question like, well, where am I being immature in my own feminine energies? When am I being immature in my own masculine energies? Because when we start to look at it, we could very much see, as you said before the break, like we enter this point where we don't really have a, not only like the rite of passage, but we don't really have an outlet for men to even realize that like they've been grown children most of their lives. So it comes back to the sense of like, okay, well, how can we apply that if we have men that haven't been grown children for most of their lives? And a lot of men have essentially made this society. We can't actually say that it's a patriarchy, right? Because that's implying that they're men making the rules, but we haven't had that. We've had more of like I think it's like a plurarchy or plutocracy, but it's more like the children's law or the child's law. And that's really what's more been expressed from both the divine masculine and feminine. It's just those immature, underdeveloped forms. Because we can look at our society and culture to realize how much we've amplified the immature of the divine feminine, of just like the jealousy, the kind of I don't want to say like cutthroat, catty, like passive aggressive, but that is exactly accurate. The immature feminine. And it's the same thing with the men, where it's just like you have a lot of reckless, depressed dudes who don't, we call them, like a lot of people unfortunately call them beta males, but it's just like because they're weak. Ultimately, they've given away their own power, their own strength, because they've tried to just bend over backwards and be water when they're not. And it's the same thing with women. They're trying to be, like a lot of things I've seen is they're trying to be fire when they're not. Like you can't, like firsthand situation is probably looking at, current situations of war and strife, where it's like, whenever war comes up, this is the first time you see people never preach for equality. And you know what I mean? And it's one of those things that's very I guess you'd say it's very straightforward in the sense of we are born with different powers and abilities. And if we don't respect those, then we can never master them. And if we somehow think that I can jump into your body and think that I can do everything you do, that is just like the most blasphemous ignorance I've ever heard.
Control.
Exactly. And that is another immature form of the divine masculine. You're trying to over control it, or it's expressed in the feminine, where it's like you're trying to micromanage everything. So it's like, oh, just give it up to source. Like, let it be.
You're making some great points, and I've been looking at people who haven't been developed with three categories, looking at three categories. So do they feel safe? Right? In this moment, are they feeling safe or not feeling safe? What about love? Are they feeling loved? Or are they feeling valued or not valued? And when there's that immaturity, What's happening is that they've been looking to fulfill their security, their love, or their value with something that's tangible, something they can see with their eyes. It's the red race car, or it's the woman with lots of friends, so that at least somebody's available when she's got to talk to someone, right?
Yeah.
Instead of finding that fulfillment from Christ consciousness, from divinity. So being secure spiritually, knowing that you're loved spiritually, being completely full and completely validated spiritually, it actually grows you up.
Yeah.
And I believe our parents should be fulfilling these needs for us unconditionally when we're children, in preparation for us to become adults, to get that directly from the source.
Yeah. And I honestly feel like that is what is emerging more and more. And I've seen it with my own clients, because I work with a mother and two of her sons, and being able to see that kind of conscious, intentional raising of children, of beings who have come to understand their own duality.
Yeah.
Way different. It's entirely different in terms of how the kids process life, how they process pain, suffering, and that's the beautiful aspect of transforming the I guess you would say parenthood from a coaching, like I'm doing this, you do that, to a facilitator. You're mentoring, it's the two-way street. You're learning from them just as much as they're learning from you.
That is so true.
And that's what we don't get, unfortunately, because again, we have technology and a lot of culture raising children nowadays. So you see them naturally kind of getting trapped in these egoic cycles that have just been passed down from generation to generation. And, I think it just as much as we talk about like the immature forms of the divine masculine and feminine, it's always important to kind of talk about like the positive traits and qualities, because if we want to look at it, you can do a little side by side where men, I guess, we're more geared towards logic. Women are intuition.
Yeah.
But how much have those roles almost been reversed, where we're almost taught to disconnect from our intuition and just be purely logic based or analytical? So, and let's take that a step further. So it's like, okay, we have logic and reason, so when you have logic and reason, you can say that you have intuition and nurturing or compassion, where it's as the feminine side. You can start to see that like with both, you have to have both energies so you can actually function in this world, because sometimes you have to be tactful with your compassion.
Yes.
You use the logic to really allow the heart to express itself how it wants to. And that's where the disharmony arises, when you don't have that appreciation for each dual energy within you, because you're just now disconnected from life. You're disconnected from source, you're disconnected from yourself, you're disconnected from others. And it's just crazy to think about. This information was just commonplace in our old cultures and societies, just naturally with how things were more set up.
Right.
So it's a wild concept.
And it's beautiful, the picture that you're painting of how parenting can shift. And it goes back to the saying that we've all heard, which is, if I want change in the world, change myself first. Because children learn by example, not as much by what you say. You can tell them all day long, but they'll follow what you do. They'll mimic who you are.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You can always tell kids who have parents that speak to them with manners, because they're the kids that are always asking, are polite.
Yeah.
Oh, can I use this, please? This, and you can just see the communication's way different. Their ability to express and connect with themselves. And seeing that's another aspect where we're completely setting up children for failure by not approaching this concept of mastering your duality with both. Because again, women that are conditioned more for the feminine, they'll never learn the expressive kind of courage and assertiveness that the more masculine energies can do, the fierceness. And it's the same thing with guys, again, where it's like you have to be able to dial it back and be more patient and wise. Because that's a feminine quality. So we got to think about it where it's like, we always think of like the wise man and all these different old, comparisons to these ancient men circles and groups where they were all wise in this. It's like, no, like they learned that from the women, because the women had the time to be methodical and really plan things and think things out when we were out fighting and dealing with nature and the elements. where we can't express as much.
You're right. The kinds of things women did were very repetitive in nature and consistent. There was lots of consistency, like it was the same clothes to wash. It was cooking, water boils at the same temperature, all of these things that were constant. And when men were out hunting, there were similarities because there was a prey, but there were always shifts. There were always changes in terrain, changes in the number of people hunting, changes in the season. Yep. I think I like your example of being fierce and men exhibiting this fierceness, and it can be extreme. So what if a woman was able to love fiercely? What if she was nurturing fiercely? And what if men were wise in the way that they disciplined, wise in the way, that they were hunting or communicating with their friends instead of everything, being punching and
Well, it's just fascinating because you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier, where you see that opportunity of allowing the body to get so focused on the doing that the consciousness and your pureness can just be present. And that's when you start to see the natural kind of wisdom of the divine feminine play more. It's just natural evolution of things, because again, you were just talking about it, like the repetitive movements, doing the same things over. The body can do that naturally. I remember my favorite place to meditate early on was driving, because I could just be like, body, all right, you got to pay attention to the road, all these other things. And it would just be like, all right, consciousness, just be. And that's the kind of trick that we can tap into. If you look at it, it's almost like a life hack, where if you just try to take yourself out of the normal constructs of what it means to be a man and a woman and start to apply it more so for your personal life and look within your own beingness of like, okay, well, how can I approach the situation if I were a man or if I were a woman? How would I carry myself? What would be something that they may say, because we always have the common comparisons where women who are in positions of power and giving orders and directions are perceived as bossy, where it's just like, okay, where it's like for myself, it's like, how can I be tactful so I can still get my words across where I'm not going to be perceived as bossy? Or for me as a man, it's like, how can I get my words across without being considered mansplaining? And again, it's the ebb and flow. It's the natural contraction, relaxation. We have to be able to hold space to really practice these things. And there's nothing more important than holding space for ourselves, which is why I see a lot of men as lacking. Because again, we're not tapped in to hold space for ourselves. Like we're not tapped in to naturally investigate our emotions. We're conditioned and geared to shut them off.
And that's the live by heart way. So it's not live by emotions way. It's not live by your thinking way. It's the live by heart way. And that's where the intuition comes from. That's where the flow comes from. So thank you, Peter. Thank you so much. What an amazing and beautiful conversation. And I look forward to the next conversation with you. I'd also like to thank everyone who's joined us today. If you're watching, please let us know. We want to hear from you. So tell us what's on your heart by leaving us a comment. And for more information about how you can live by heart and be in the flow, please go to livebyhearttoday.com. Like and follow this page and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our programs. We're here on Thursdays at 4:44 Pacific time. From our heart to yours, connecting our body and soul as we live by heart today.
And that concludes this portion of Live by Heart Today. And thank you to our sponsors for making the show possible. Hooray! Thank you, We Are Historically, for your conscious human apparel. Shop online at wearehistorically.com.
Level up your life and raise your vibration with specialized Fibonacci tuning forks. Get your vibrational sound tools for your personal enhancement at energybodytuners.com.
Thank you for joining us. Have a happy always. View more episodes on our website.
I got to give a shout out to Shakti Revolution. It was one of the first women's sacred groups that I assisted with.